The Kingdom of Sweden is founded on the union of two tribes, the Svea in the north and the Götar in the south. The name Sweden is derived from the Svea. In Swedish it would be Svea Rike, which became Sverige, the Swedish name for Sweden, and in English it would be the Svea Kingdom, which became Sweden. The Swedish people is very closely related to the Danes, whom almost all students of the lost tribes of Israel agree to be primarily of the tribe of Dan. The Swedish people must therefore be of a tribe or tribes closely related to Dan. Dan's only full brother was Naphtali, whom we identify as Norway. In the Old Testament we read that Dan was closely connected to Naphtali and Asher, which were two of the other tribes of the handmaidens. The Icelandic historian Snorri Sturluson, who lived 1179 to 1241, wrote the books the Younger Edda approximately 1220, and 10 years later he wrote the Heimskringla, which is also known as the Chronicles of Kings of Norway. And in those two books, Snorri wrote that the ancestors of the Nordic peoples, that's the Norwegians and Swedes and Danes and Icelanders, that their ancestors had migrated to Scandinavia from the Black Sea region, led by one or several chieftain priests called Odin. In 2002, the legendary Norwegian explorer and adventurer Thor Heyerdahl wrote the book Jagten på Odin, which means The Search for Odin, where Thor Heyerdahl identified Odin's capital, where the Aser and Vaner tribes had lived before they migrated to Scandinavia, as the Russian city of Azov on the Black Sea coast. Snorri Sturluson of Iceland also wrote that because the Roman general Pompey the Great expanded the Roman Empire in the Black Sea region in the Third Mithridatic War, which was in the 70s to 60s BC, that because of that reason, Odin chose to lead the Aser and Vaner tribes in a migration from the Black Sea region to Scandinavia. And Snorri also wrote that Odin also had great estates in Asia Minor. In the Hebrew Old Testament, we read in the book of 2 Kings chapter 17 that the Assyrian Empire invaded the kingdom of Israel in the late 8th century BC and deported 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel out of the land of Israel and settled them in northern areas of the Assyrian Empire. And that happened to be very close to where Snorri Sturluson of Iceland wrote that Odin had great estates. We quote, "In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea the son of Elah to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria, and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Hala and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes." Unquote. 2 Kings chapter 17 verses 1 to 6. And again we quote from the same chapter. "Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only." Unquote. 2 Kings chapter 17 verse 18. The areas where the Assyrians placed the 10 tribes of Israel happens to be almost identical to the areas in Asia Minor, where Snorri wrote that Odin had great estates, and where we must presume that the Aser and Vaner tribes lived before they migrated to the Russian Black Sea region. The very names Aser and Vaner also happen to be very similar to the names Asher and Dan, the names of 2 of the 10 Israelite tribes which the Assyrians deported around 721 BC. The reason for this apparent coincidence is, of course, that the Aser and Vaner tribes of Scandinavia are the Israelite tribes of Asher and Dan that used to live in the land of Israel and entered into the Mosaic covenant at Mount Sinai along with the rest of the tribes of Israel. According to Snorri, Odin and the Aser tribe migrated through northern Germany and Denmark to central Sweden, where Odin set up his capital in Uppsala, north of Stockholm. Snorri Sturluson traced the ancestors of the Scandinavians to the two tribes Aser and Vaner. The Vaner tribe became the Danes. Odin was of the Aser tribe, and according to the Danish historian Peter Frederik Suhn, the last historical Odin, and there were at least 3 different Odins, so the last historical Odin settled in Uppsala in Sweden. Odin and the Aser tribe, which settled in Uppsala and Sweden, must therefore be of the Israelite tribe of Asher. In the Old Testament, the Israelite tribes of Dan, Naphtali, and Asher, and sometimes Gad, are usually mentioned in connection with each other. This is because these 4 tribes were descended from the 4 patriarchs that were born to Jacob's 2 concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. We must therefore assume that in the exile they would also be found living close to each other. And on this map, we can see the 12 tribes of Israel in the Old Testament period in the land of Israel. And in the north, we find the tribes of Asher and Naphtali. The tribe of Dan was allotted a territory between the tribe of Ephraim and the Philistines around the Gaza Strip, the present-day Gaza Strip. But after the death of Samson, the tribe of Dan migrated to the north of Israel in what is today Tel Dan, a historical site close to the border of Lebanon. And there they lived right next to the tribes of Naphtali and Asher. So this is fulfilled in the fact that we identify Denmark with the tribe of Dan and Norway with the tribe of Naphtali. As we mentioned, Sweden was founded on the union of the 2 tribes of the Svea in the north and the Göta in the south and the Guta on the Gotland island. We identify the Svea as the tribe of Asher and the Göta and the Guta as the tribe of Gad. Thus the 4 tribes of Dan, Naphtali, Asher and Gad are found in Scandinavia today. But not only in Scandinavia. Gad is also found in northern Germany and elsewhere, and Dan is also found in Ireland and elsewhere. Asher, literally the Israelite Viking tribe. An astonishing fact is that in the book of Judges, the tribe of Asher is almost literally called the Viking tribe. Approximately 1285 BC, when Deborah and Barak were fighting to liberate Israel from a Canaanite occupation, not all the tribes contributed to the freedom struggle. One of them was Asher. Deborah and Barak complained, we quote, "Asher continued at the seashore and stayed by his inlets," unquote, from the book of Judges, chapter 5, verse 17, from the New King James Version. According to most scholars, the name Viking is derived from the Old Norse word vik, V-I-K, which in English means inlet. And that's because the Vikings used inlets and fjords and similar bodies of waters as harbors. And in Scandinavian Bibles, this verse literally states that the tribe of Asher abode in Vika or Vika, which is identical to the origin of the word Viking. And we quote from a Swedish and a Norwegian Bible where Vik is still spelled V-I-K. In Danish, it's spelled V-I-G. So first we quote from a Swedish Bible, quote, "Asa satt kvar vid havets strand, vid sina vikar stannade han," unquote. And from a Norwegian Bible, quote, "Asher som bodde ved havets strand holdt sig i vikene der," unquote. This hidden prophecy about Asher being a Viking tribe is fulfilled in the Swedish Vikings, who traveled and traded across Russia and the Ukraine. In 862, the Eastern Slavic peoples asked the Varangian Rus, which were Swedish Vikings, to establish what would become the kingdom of the Kievan Rus. This kingdom evolved into the East Slavic nations of Russia, the Ukraine, and Belarus. Swedish Vikings were also famous for their fighting skills and their loyalty. From 874 to the 13th century, the Varangian Guard was an elite unit in the East Roman army. It consisted mainly of Swedes, but also some Danes, Norwegians, and Anglo-Saxons. The Varangian Guard was also the personal bodyguard unit of the East Roman Emperor because it did not trust the native soldiers who were notorious for switching loyalty from one strongman to another. Asher, a tribe where women were important. The genealogies in the Bible almost only mention males. Rarely do they mention females, and when they do, it is usually to make a point. In the genealogies of Asher, we find no less than 2 females. We quote, "The sons of Asher, Imna and Isua and Ishuai and Beriah and Sarah their sister. And the sons of Beriah, Heber and Malchiel, who is the father of Birsavith. And Heber begat Japhlet and Shomer and Hotham and Shua their sister." Unquote. From 1 Chronicles chapter 8 verses 30-32. This mentioning of 2 sisters is not explained in the scriptures, but it must have a meaning. The message could be that in the tribe of Asher, women would have greater prominence than among the other tribes. This is fulfilled in Sweden, which self-identifies and is looked upon from the outside world as a stronghold of feminism. And this is not a defense of feminism, but simply an explanation why Sweden and Scandinavia in general has an inclination towards feminism. And if you would like to know more about the lost tribes of Israel, you can buy my book, The Lost 10 Tribes of Israel in Europe, which I published last year. It is 352 pages, and you can buy it on Amazon. The price, excluding postage and handling, is $9 for the paperback version, $17 for the hardcover version, and $2 for the Kindle ebook. The Kindle ebook is, of course, without any postage and handling. And as I said, you can buy it on Amazon. Beriah Svea. The name of one of the sons of Asher is Beriah, or Beriah. When a name of the son of a patriarch is mentioned in the Bible, it is for a reason. It is not a coincidence. In Hebrew, as well as in many other languages, the letters B and V are interchangeable. For example, in modern Hebrew, Reuben is called Reuven and Abraham is called Avraham. Therefore, Beriah or Beriah could easily become Veriah, which is rather close to the name Svea. Asher's birth. Asher was Jacob's 8th son. We read about his birth, and we quote, "And Zilpah, Leah's mate, bare Jacob a 2nd son. And Leah said, Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed, and she called his name Asher." Unquote. Genesis chapter 30, verses 12-13. Asher would therefore be connected with happiness and blessings. Now, according to the World Happiness Report, Sweden is the 6th happiest nation in the world. And by the way, the 19 happiest nations are what we view as Israelite nations. God said that he would bless Israel, and he certainly has also blessed them with happiness. Asher, a strongly defended nation. When Moses blessed the 12 tribes, he said of Asher, we quote, "Most blessed of sons is Asher. Let him be favored by his brothers, and let him bathe his feet in oil. The bolts of your gates will be iron and bronze, and your strength will be equal your days." Unquote, from Deuteronomy chapter 33, verses 24-25, from the New International Version. Asher's birth was connected with blessings, and so is Moses' blessing. When it is said that the bolts of Asher's gates would be like iron and bronze, it means that Asher would be a strongly defended and hard to invade. This is fulfilled in Sweden, which has not been under overt foreign control or invaded, except for fighting on Swedish borders since the Swedish War of Liberation 1521 to 1523. Until 1523, Sweden had been a part of the Kalmar Union, which was a union of Denmark, Norway and Sweden, headed by the King of Denmark. Moses' prophecy that Asher's strength will equal his days could mean that the life expectancy of the Asherites would be high. This is fulfilled in Sweden, having the 15th highest life expectancy in the world. Swedes on average live 83.82 years. Götar and Gutar of southern Sweden. Sweden was united around the year AD 1000 when the Svea of central northern Sweden and the Götar of central southern Sweden, in English they are called Geats, and the Gutar of the island of Gotland united under King Olaf Skytkonung. At that time, ethnic Danes inhabited the southern part of the Scandinavian peninsula, and Finno-Ugric tribes inhabited what today is northern Sweden. The Götar or Geats on the Scandinavian mainland and the Gutar on the island of Gotland are no doubt of the tribe of Gat. The tribe of Gat was one of the two sons of Silpar, Lea's maidservant. Gat's only full brother was Asher, whom we identify with Sweden or central northern Sweden. And in the Old Testament, Gad is sometimes mentioned alongside the other tribes of the concubines, Asher, Dan and Naphtali. Gad would therefore be expected to live rather close to Dan, Asher and Naphtali. Since we have identified Denmark with Dan and Norway with Naphtali and central northern Sweden with Asher, it's therefore obvious to identify the Götar or Geats of central southern Sweden and the Gutar of the island of Gotland with the tribe of Gad. Gad, a warrior tribe. Gad was to become a great warrior tribe. Of Gad's birth we read, quote, "And Silpar, Lea's maid, bare Jacob a son, and Leah said, A troop cometh, and she called his name Gad." Unquote. Genesis chapter 30 verses 10 to 11. The name Gad means fortune or troop, two seemingly very different meanings. Fortune is similar to what was said about Asher, but in other parts of the scriptures, Gad is also said to become a great warrior tribe. When Jacob blessed his 12 sons, he set up Gad, we quote, "Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last." Unquote. Genesis chapter 49 verse 19. The Hebrew word troop here means a crowd, especially of soldiers, or an army, band of men, company, troop of robbers. That's from Strong's exhaustive concordance of the Bible. In Moses' blessing of the 12 tribes, Gad is again said to become a warrior tribe. We quote, "And of Gad he said, Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. He dwelleth as a lion, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. And he provided the first part for himself, because there in a portion of the lawgiver was he seated, and he came with the heads of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel." Unquote. Deuteronomy chapter 33 verses 20 to 21. Sweden has been a warrior nation and still is, more so than most other Western nations. In the Middle Ages, Denmark was the regional superpower in Scandinavia, but when King Gustav II Adolf became King of Sweden in 1611, he immediately reformed the Swedish military into a fighting force second to none. Until that time, European states hired mercenaries when they were going to war. But King Gustav II Adolf changed that by making the Swedish army a national army through conscription of healthy men. Sweden was the first nation in Europe to convert from Catholicism to Protestantism, that is, Lutheranism, in 1523. And Gustav II Adolf also gave the Swedish Lutheran Church the responsibility of conscripting men. This gave the Swedish army a religious and moral advantage over the foreign mercenary armies who owed their allegiance to Mammon. After the Reformation, the Catholic nations tried to stop the spread of Protestantism. This led to the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, which more or less was a religious civil war in Germany with many foreign actors. Sweden entered the 30 Years' War in 1630, and in 1631 the Swedish army defeated the Catholic League in the Battle of Breitenfeld. In 1632 the Swedish army again defeated the Catholic League and killed its commander, Count Tilly. From that point in time, Sweden was seen as the champion of the Protestant cause in Europe. King Gustav II Adolf was known as the Lion of the North, and his entire life was like a fulfillment of Moses' prophecy of Gad. He dwelleth as a lion and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. Deuteronomy 33, verse 20. In 1682, the allotment system of the Swedish army was completed. This changed the Swedish army into a Christian fighting force. The soldiers were to pray every day and to be respectful to civilians. Rape, interrupting prayer, and taking the name of God in vain were all crimes punished with the death penalty. The Swedish Empire culminated in the Great Northern War, where Sweden was opposed by virtually all its neighbors, though not at the same time, and that included Russia, Great Britain, the Kingdom of Denmark-Norway, Prussia, Poland-Lithuania, and Hanover. In 1708, King Charles XII of Sweden even launched a full-scale invasion of Russia, which was rather successful until the Battle of Poltava in 1709, where the Russian army soundly defeated the Swedish invaders. And this is eerily similar to Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812 and Germany's invasions of Russia in 1914 and 1941. Despite battling against many and much larger nations than itself, Sweden persevered until 1721. This was when the age of the Swedish Empire ended. Today, Sweden still has a military might superior to most other nations of its size. Sweden has remained neutral since the Napoleonic Wars until 2009, when Sweden signed a mutual defense agreement with the other EU member states, and in 2024, when Sweden became a member of NATO. This long period of neutrality has been one of the reasons why Sweden has maintained a potent military-industrial complex. The Swedish military-industrial complex not only supplies equipment to the Swedish armed forces, but exports even more equipment abroad. One of the most well-known Swedish military companies is Saab, which produces the JAS-39 Gripen fighter aircraft, which serves in the air forces of Sweden, Hungary, South Africa, and Brazil. That's the one on the photo here. Another is the Bofors Industries, which produces and exports artillery, howitzers, and anti-aircraft guns. Today, Bofors is a part of the British BAE Systems. Despite the fact that the Swedish ruling elite is a champion of political correctness and multiculturalism, Sweden also exhibits all the characteristics said to be found in the Israelite tribes of Gad and Asher. The Camp of Dan and the Kalmar Union. After the Exodus, when Israel was wandering in the wilderness, the 12 tribes were divided into 4 camps, consisting of 3 tribes each. The Camp of Dan consisted of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. In the Old Testament, the three tribes are usually mentioned next to each other, and for most of their time in the land of Israel, they lived next to each other in northern Israel. This is similar to Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. The 3 nations were united in the personal union, the Kalmar Union, from 1397 to 1523, which meant that they remained nominally independent kingdoms but had the same monarch. The monarch, however, was always the Danish monarch. This meant that Denmark came to dominate Sweden and Norway. And this again is similar to the Camp of Dan in the Old Testament, because Dan was, of course, the leading tribe in the Camp of Dan. Scandinavian languages are mutually intelligible. Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish are mutually intelligible languages. It means that they are able to understand most of the other languages without prior familiarity or special effort. Danish and Norwegian has the highest mutual intelligibility, that's a hard word, while Swedish has a lower mutual intelligibility with Danish and Norwegian. This also affirms that Denmark and Norway primarily are of Dan and Naphtali, who were full brothers, while Sweden primarily is of Asher and Gad, who were also full brothers. Early Swedish Israelite witness Johannes Eurenius. One of the earliest witnesses to write in detail about our Israelite origin was the Swedish Lutheran pastor Johannes Eurenius, who lived 1688 to 1751, who was pastor in the Lutheran Evangelical State Church in Ångermanland and Torsåker in northern Sweden. Eurenius wrote the book Atlantica Orientalis, eller Atlantis till dess rätta belägenhet beskrivet för många år sedan, which in English means Atlantica Orientalis, or the Cape of Atlantis described at its right position many years ago. It was published in Strängnäs in Sweden in 1751. In this book, which contained a foreword by the chapter dean Carl Frederik Lundbjerg of the Swedish Lutheran Evangelical Church, Johannes Eurenius used 140 pages to describe that the Nordic peoples were descendants of the lost 10 tribes of Israel by using the Bible, Nordic and Greek myths and history. He wrote that the Greek myth of the giant Atlas was a legend or a folk memory of the forefather of the Nordic peoples, Jacob Israel. He also believed that the myth of the lost land of Atlantis was a legend or folk memory of the Nordic peoples' lost homeland Canaan, from which the children of Israel had disappeared when they were deported by the Assyrians. Atlantica Orientalis was also published in the Latin language in Germany. It was published in Berlin, Stralsund, and Leipzig in 1764. But Johannes Eurenius had to go through much opposition before his book Atlantica Orientalis could be published, especially because many did not like challenging the flattering thesis which the famous Swedish historian Olof Rudbeck the Elder had written about in his monumental work Atlant eller Mannheim, which was published 1679 to 702, that Scandinavia was the lost Atlantis. Johannes Eurenius was a learned man who was held in great respect for his teachings, and he was also viewed as a brilliant man of the church and was in particular known for his linguistic and musical talents. He also wrote several other books in Swedish and Latin. So here are some excerpts from Atlantica Orientalis, which is written in Old Swedish, so it's rather hard to translate into English. So from chapter 1, with the title On the Land of Israel, Atlantica. Quote, "The history of the children of Israel is no less true and ancient than it is wonderful and matchless, and besides other names with which this highly famous people have been called. It is certain that the Greeks called them Atlanteans, and that the Greeks called the land of Israel Atlantica." Unquote, from page 1 of Atlantica Orientalis. And we again quote, "Oh, let everyone else look in vain as long as they desire, but it is a certain truth that the Greek word Atlas is the very same as the Hebrew name Israel." Unquote, from page 3. And then from chapter 6 with a heading, "The Dispersed Scythians or Exiled Israelites." We quote, "As well known as the Scythian name is, as unknown are their true ancestry. All histories speak of them, and many count them among their countrymen, but no one seems to be able to positively prove how they first dispersed in Asia, and how their great power and glory has been able to spread at that time, as the highest government in the same lands was held by the Chaldeans, the Assyrians, the Medes, the Persians, and the Greeks. Thus it seems to me very obvious if these Scythians were the families of Israel who after the time of Salmanassar dispersed themselves in the eastern lands and did not, at the request of Cyrus, go home, but did plant inhabitants out in the at that time uninhabited wastelands and lands towards the north." Unquote, from page 83. And then from chapter 7 with the heading, "The Sveas and the Goths origin from the Scythians or the lost children of Israel," where Irenaeus wrote that Thor is a legend or folk memory of Moses. We quote, "Thor is a Hebrew word, as well as the title of Moses. Therefore, he came out of the thunderstorm and the unheard thundering, and carried forth the law of God, which in Hebrew just as much marks Thor as a lawgiver." Unquote, from page 109. And we again quote, "Thor is said to have had a club with which he struck his enemies and opened the rock." And then it is mentioned by several historians that it is called Thor's scepter or staff, and which was surrounded by fire, and is a certain reminder of Moses' staff, which followed him into the fire, hit the rock, and defeated his adversaries. Unquote, from page 110. Irenaeus also wrote that the old pagan temple in Uppsala was modeled after King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. We quote, "Of the temple of Sala, that is Uppsala, just as the city had its name from the former residence of the Israelites in Canaan, so the temple in Uppsala was an image of the ruined Solomon's temple in Jerusalem." Unquote, from page 112. And about the religious practices of the Israelites and the Swedes, we quote, "With all this, you can nonetheless feel an extraordinary similarity on all points between the religious practices of the Israelites and of the Swedes, which convinces us of their relationship." Unquote, from page 115. And concerning the language, we quote, "Furthermore, the language which we have kept confirms that our ancestors have sprung from Israelite refugees and Scythians, since we have an extraordinary mixture of the languages through which the Israelites stayed during the exodus out of the Orient and wandered through." Unquote, from page 122. So from this we can conclude that one of the signs that a nation and an ethnic group is descended from the lost tribes of Israel is the presence of people who believe that they are descended from the lost tribes of Israel. And the fact that Sweden has produced one of the earliest witnesses to write about our Israelite origin in detail, and also that there have been a number of later public advocates for this theory and also are today, that confirms that Sweden indeed is an Israelite nation.